Changing the world, what does that mean? Like, I'm a 17-year-old, I go to high school, today I'm skipping school. Like, what does it mean for me who sits in a classroom from like 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. most days to be changing the world? When I think about changing the world, I think these like three things immediately come to mind. First, ending poverty. Second, forging international peace. And third, expanding education. Lots of other things, these big, giant ideals, right? That's what you think about when you think about changing the world. But I think what often gets lost in that conversation is the fact that changing the world can start from just one very small event in time and one person. For me, my entire journey started with my grandfather. Now, growing up, my grandfather and I were very close, and he and I would always actually sing to each other, and that's how we bonded together. And I remember when I was 4 years old, actually, the two of us were walking in a park in Japan. We were singing our favorite songs to each other, and at one point, his face suddenly went completely blank. And I knew that he was lost. I was only 4 years old at the time, and I didn't really understand what was going on, but I knew that he didn't remember the way to get back home. And that was really frightening. I actually remember the 60 minutes that it took my mother, who's here in the audience today, to find us was actually the scariest hour that I ever spent in my entire life. That incident, that moment, that one moment in time that he stopped singing, turned out to mark the first sign of my grandfather's Alzheimer's disease. And over the years, his condition got worse and worse. And in particular, he started wandering out of bed at night frequently. And my mother, my aunt, and I had decided to take turns looking after my grandfather. But when we moved to New York City in the summer of 2012, my aunt became his primary caregiver. And at that time, his wandering started to become much more frequent. So he would actually get out of bed at least once every night. And my aunt had to stay awake all night to keep an eye on him, and even then often failed to catch him leaving the bed. So learning about how much stress she was going through and the fact that my grandfather could encounter accidents whenever he wandered, I became very concerned about my aunt's well-being as well as my grandfather's safety. And one night, I was trying to think of a solution, and I also happened to be on night watch for Grandpa. This is when I'd returned back home to California for Thanksgiving break. And I remember seeing him stepping out of the bed, and then the moment his foot landed on the floor, I had this sort of eureka moment. I saw the solution to my family's problem. I thought, why don't I put a pressure sensor under the heel of my grandfather's foot? And as soon as he steps onto the floor, the pressure sensor would detect an increase in pressure and then send an alert to my aunt's smartphone, waking her up. And that was the initial idea, and it took a long time for me to pursue the idea. I had to encounter several challenges that I didn't anticipate, including making a very thin and flexible pressure sensor, creating a circuit that could wirelessly communicate with a smartphone app that could essentially like transform the caregiver's smartphone into a remote monitor. These were all things that I had to go through. And it was just such a stressful experience, and there were so many challenges involved in it. But I think what was really rewarding at the end of that experience was just one moment, one singular moment when I had finished my prototype, I had integrated all these components together, and I decided to test it on my grandfather for the first time. And I remember in the middle of the night, we were all sleeping, trying to figure out whether or not this sensor would work. And my grandfather stepped out of the bed, and we all hear this one alert, this faint alert beeping out. And we knew that the sensor was working because my grandfather had gotten out of bed. And I just really felt at that moment, not only that technology could change lives for the better, but also just that the fact that my sensor could bring my entire family peace of mind in just that one moment really made me feel like my entire experience was very rewarding. And I continued to pursue the idea. I created my own startup so that I could commercialize the sensor and deliver it to those in need. And I'm actually starting to ship out my sensors today. So today actually happens to be two occasions, one this award and also shipping out the sensor. Thank you very much. But I guess my point is that these big moments that define us, that define changing the world, which by the way, I don't think my sensor deserves that title in any way whatsoever, but these big moments of changing the world are all actually, when you think about it, really small. They start from one sliver in like the vast continuum of time. They start from one person in this giant pool of people that we call our collective humanity. It all started from one person getting lost and starting to forget how to sing his grandson his favorite songs. It all starts from one moment of his grandson realizing that his sensor would actually work and send out an alert when his grandfather got out of bed at night. these small moments define us, and they define big progress for us. And again, I don't think that this sensor is worthy of a title like Changing the World. But if we want to expand our way of thinking about wisdom, for example, we have to realize that these big challenges often start from very small places, that we can't just start tackling them and imagining that they're these things that affect billions of people. We have to start on a very small level. Thank you very much.